Jeremy, Hasnain, Ali, Assalamu alaikum. Hello to you all, and thanks so
Walaikum
much for joining
assalam.
us on this podcast. Jeremy, it's such a pleasure to have you on, with us. We've been following each other on Twitter for quite some time. And, your tweets never fail to make me LOL out loud. Just now today,
Thank you,
your commentary on the US election is brilliant. And I think just, seeing people's reaction to your tweets because they don't understand that you're joking makes it even more hilarious. So
yeah, tensions are really high right now, and so everybody has this like they want to make you be serious. They want to figure out like what are you really saying, and you're just being silly. So I love that so much.
Yeah, and we definitely love reading it. So I wanted to just start off before we get into the main topic, just speaking about the US election, just because I feel like, obviously we can't ignore it.
Right,
so for those,
of course not.
Listening, just for context, we're recording this on Friday. It'll be released on Sunday. And between now and then, God knows what will happen, what will change.
Yeah, there's going to be a civil war between now and then, and we're just going to be sitting here chatting or whatever. Two of us will be dead, and it'll be, yeah.
We really just talked about this last time too, about the Civil War.
Yeah, it's funny because
from beyond the grave, I'm talking to you,
Because last week, they were asking me about my thoughts on it, and I was like, I feel like there'll be a civil war, and between then and now, nothing's changed to make me think that there won't be. So, what's your genuine thoughts and concerns right now, leading up to when the president-elect which will most likely be Biden, will be announced?
Right. I don't know. I mean, I feel like. Right now, obviously Biden looks like he's got it. The Trump campaign are, saying there's a lot of voter fraud, and who knows if that's true. And what I guess I'm worried that we'll just move on really fast, but they will not move on, and things will be. I mean, like it's kind of like 4 years ago when like Trump won, and then people were like he stole it because like Russia helped him or whatever.
Yeah.
And then it was like that for 2 years. And it's like, they said that Trump stole it for like years. And it's like, I don't know if it's healthy for half the country to just always think the other side like legitimately stole the election. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't seem healthy to me. And so I hope that like whatever happens, like the person who won, people will like know that they won. But I'm pretty skeptical of that going forward, because there's a lot of like, clout and money to be made, like saying that they didn't win. So I don't know.
Oh yeah. I don't know if you guys seen the bets, but there's a $5 million bet that Trump's gonna win. That guy's gonna lose a lot of money.
Yeah.
Well, personally, Hasnain, it's haram for me to bet, so I don't look at betting sites, but I know you do.
All right. I mean.
Well, at least people who bet are like putting their money where their mouth is, because like right now you can just like predict something, and you're not even really predicting it. You're saying you predict it, but it's so you will influence people who you're listening to. You're like, I predict this will happen, and then like it's like polls. Like polls are. I don't even think they're that useful, like to the average person. I think it's just a way to pressure people, you're like, you like somebody and you're like, really, he's only at 1%. And like, you don't even know if that's true or not. Right.
Yeah,
so, so with predictions, I think people are just, pushing their weight around, but I don't know. It's,
I think what's interesting and perhaps even more scary, and you alluded to this in your response, but I read an article today, or I read the headline rather, about how, after the election, even if Trump loses, Trumpism will last for a long time, and even recently we've been seeing Donald Trump Jr. coming out and essentially attacking the Republican establishment, saying if you're not with us, we're essentially going to create our own thing.
It's pretty quick. I mean, it's pretty quick to see how quickly the Republican establishment just bailed on Trump. Like, I mean, it happened pretty fast, and so but like there seems to be this narrative that's sort of emerging of like the stabbed in the back narrative, right? Where Trump could have won, but the Republican establishment turned on him at the last minute, and like Fox News called Arizona, and so then you just have years of like resentment and feeling like you got torn away from that. As far as Trumpism, I mean, it depends on what it is, right? Like, so if Trumpism is like just Trump's ego and his like that kind of style of politics, then good riddance, right? But if Trumpism is sort of a more populist understanding of the Republican Party, then like I guess I'm a little worried about where the Republican Party goes from here. Because I mean, as much as you don't like Trump, it's like, as a person, right? He's obnoxious and he's like stresses you out or whatever. But like, where like is the Republican Party just going to go back to like tax cuts and like small government, whatever? And like, I don't know if that's like, cutting welfare and stuff like that. Like, I don't think that, like when Trump first ran, there was this moment where you're like, well, I don't like him, but there seems to be a possibility that like the right in America could become, I guess, less libertarian, more about helping families and, like, and then like the Trump wanted, more stimulus, during the pandemic, and the GOP establishment was like, no. And I think if Trump had done that, he would have won. But the fact that we got nothing during the entire pandemic is just absurd. We got no wages, like it was so hard to get anything. Like, I think that, so I'm not like pining for Trump. And there is a part that's like, it'd be kind of nice if he just went away forever. Yeah. But I feel like the path forward for the Republican Party, I don't know. I'm just real worried they're going to go back to the way they were, and it's just going to be awful.
Hasnain, what's your thoughts on this? Because I feel like in New York, it's such an interesting situation because you're almost surrounded by, people who hate Trump and vote Democrat. And when you see these numbers of half the country voting for Trump, you kind of like think to yourself, where are these people coming from? Living in that kind of bubble, what are your thoughts with the way the elections are happening right now?
So it's surprising to me, to be honest with you, because when you look at the electoral map and you see all that red compared to that blue, it's just like, really, like these people really want this guy back in power. Like, interesting. Like, it's like, I'm not bashing them. It's just interesting to see like what's their thought process behind it, right? But even in New York, you'll be surprised. If you go outside of the city, there's a lot of Trump support, especially like in Long Island, especially like in Albany. But obviously, because I live in New York City within the 5 boroughs, that holds the most weight. Hence why New York always went blue. But there is a lot of, Trump supporters, especially I work on Wall Street. For those of you who don't know, my first life compared to my second life. But there is a lot of, Wall Street support for the Republican Party. But it's interesting. Like, when I walk around the city, it's very eerie here. Very, very eerie. It's like almost too quiet. And it's like, how it's eerie where like there's a preparation for something big to happen. That's what it feels like in New York City. I mean, I can't speak for
the calm before the storm.
Yeah, basically, I can't speak for other cities. That I know New Jersey is similar to. I was out there for a little bit, but it's like very eerie, and it's just like it's kind of scary because it's like, when COVID happened, the city shut down, and New York, like you never think of New York shutting down. And then this feels worse than when COVID shut down the city. Wow. It's just like, what's about to happen? And then, when you're walking around Fifth Avenue and everything's boarded up, and it's just very eerie. So I don't know what's going to happen. But, within the city, you see a lot of Biden flags when I walk down the block, but outside of the city in general, in the more urban regions of New York, yeah, there's a lot of Trump support. And even if you zoom in onto the New York City map, of like where in New York City went to what, you'll see there's a lot of red in New York as well, which is very surprising.
Very, very scary times we're living in. I want to move on to the more lighthearted part of the episode. So Jeremy, I titled this podcast Christianity, Islam, and Stand-Up Comedy, and we're going to find a way to bring all those things together. And I think, you're in such an interesting place because not only are you a stand-up comedian, but you're also, you know, a very devout Christian who also does stand up for Muslim communities worldwide. So I think, you know, just that in itself is something so fascinating to kind of dissect. So I wanted to just start off, you know, with your interest in comedy. What kind of got you into stand up specifically? And when did you start, and why did you decide to get into it?
I mean, I think for a lot of people, like a lot of comics, including myself, you know, stand-up comedy it's a way of processing reality. So you know, things happen to you that are bad. You know, just like there's stuff in the news. You're dealing with your own mental health issues and art in general, but also, you know, for us, stand-up comedy is a way of learning how to see the world in a way that you can then like relate to others and. So you can put whatever happens in, you know, if you make a joke about it, then it's a way that you process it. And then it's also a way that connects you to other people, you know, making them laugh. And so for me, it was definitely that, you know, when I first moved back to Charleston, I lived in Chicago for a while, moved back to Charleston, and I was doing, you know, like I was pretty depressed and I had friends who were doing stand up. And so I started doing it and just like, I loved it. And I liked the way that I could take my story and everything that I had been experiencing, and also stuff that I was interested in, and put it through that prism. Because like before comedy, I was just like super angry, right? Like I would read something about the news, and I would just get all serious about it and get like super intense and like ruin people's day talking about, you know, like that. Like I was like that guy at the bar, you know, like who like is way too into all this stuff. And so for like, yeah, so, and it was not healthy for me, you know, and but like by becoming a stand-up comic and by like doing all that stuff, I was able to like, okay, like how do I address this stuff? How do I think about this stuff in a way that can relate to other people? Because comedy is something that's very deep. It's about like what people you know, how people view reality, how you can disrupt that, how you can surprise people. There's something very like primal about like making people laugh when they don't want to laugh, you know, like where they are it's something like pre-rational. They haven't even thought about the joke yet, but like when they're laughing. And so yeah, so like for me, that's how I started doing stand-up, was doing that. And then yeah.
I think what's so interesting is you talk about how, you know, that kind of artistic expression really helped you deal with your own, you know, kind of like inner demons. And I think all creatives in whatever field they're in, and that's something we've kind of learned over the course of this podcast, whether, you know, they write or they do art or into filmmaking, it's always, you know, a way to manifest their inner demons and kind of, you know, process their inner realities. And even, you know, me, someone who writes poetry, I find myself that whenever I'm in a gap where I'm not writing, I do start to get a bit worked up. I do start to get a bit, you know, all those things you described, kind of angry and kind of, you know, I don't know, I guess stuffy is kind of the correct word to use. And it's
I always say constipated.
That's correct. Yeah,
right. I'm feeling constipated.
Mentally,
like, I think, like I'm mentally constipated.
Yeah.
And I need to like write some material to like to get some fiber in there, you know.
Yeah, there's just so much swelling around, right? And you just need to kind of like process it through that art. And I wanted to ask you, I know you're very devout and religious. Would you say that religion and devoutness and being religious impedes stand-up comment?
Impedes it? No. Yeah. I think that all stand-up, I mean, all art comes from a view of reality. And, you know, do you view reality as something that's basically good, as a gift from God, or as just chaos? I think that's a big dividing line among artists. And I think that, you know, for me, like, it's not like I'm like writing material and I'm like, oh, I can't say that, you know, I'm like editing, like, cause it's like sinful or something. It's more that like, you know, my view of reality is shaped by the things that I believe about the supernatural and like the tenets of my faith. And so obviously that comes out in my approach to comedy, right? So like for me, comedy is about humbling people, right? So like and like when I think of somebody who's not funny, right? What I think of is somebody who demands that reality be a certain way, like they're very intense, and then they want people to behave like this, right? And they want like stories to go like this, and they're angry, and they get angry and frustrated when things are messy, right? They get like, to me, that is the profile of somebody who's not funny. Somebody who is funny is somebody who's okay with mess, is okay with meeting somebody who is totally different than how they thought people should think or behave or whatever. And so that kind of humility, that kind of sort of acceptance of reality, I think is at the core of my approach to like the world, and also like stand up, of like things that are funny, where I think that, just receiving the world and like receiving input as just as a gift, not as something to be like, like, okay, well, I got to make this make sense. Or, you meet somebody that like is totally not like what you thought people should think like, and like, when you hear about that, are you like frustrated by it, or are you like, man, I got to find out more about this, so like, to me, that's like where it comes from.
The reason I asked the question is because I feel like, especially from, the kind of people, stand-up comedians I see who are most successful. So I'll give you a prime example. I love watching Dave Chappelle. That guy makes me, just I'm sure Hasnain and Ali will agree, very entertaining, hilarious. But the one thing I hate about his routine, and the one thing I hate about the majority of stand-up comics that kind of like successful and have these Netflix specials and are out there, is they thrive on vulgarity. They thrive on making you feel uncomfortable. And I feel like a big part of stand-up comedy, at least based on what I've seen, is to see how far you can push the boat and almost offend. So because I feel like someone who's, correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like someone who's spiritual or religious wouldn't want to kind of offend or be vulgar, and therefore could not be a perfect stand-up comedian. Am I wrong in that statement? Or
I think you're wrong. I mean, I think that in one sense you're right, because there's stuff that you can't, or not necessarily can't, but there's stuff that you won't say. But at the same time, I think that, the reason they are vulgar, right, is because it's surprising, and it's taboo, and it's something that you are, so because it's taboo, but like that kind of stuff is not, like, to me, that kind of vulgarity is not very taboo anymore, and it's also not very surprising anymore, and I think that if you can figure out, I think my big advice to comics who are starting out, even if you do like vulgar comedy, which, like, I love, if I like go to a comedy show and the guy's vulgar, like, I'll laugh, but like if you can figure out how to make people laugh, how to surprise people without being vulgar, I think you got something. I think you've got your finger on something that I think is really, really powerful, because I think that's what it is. It's not necessarily just, talking about bad stuff or whatever, that like, I mean, that's not why people laugh. They're not like laughing because, like, yes, this is vulgar. It's that they're they're like, whoa, well, how is he even allowed to say this? And I think you can do that without, like, saying certain things. And all creativity comes from restrictions, comes from having some sort of barrier, and then figuring out how to get around it. And so if you figure out, so like that restriction, I'm going to do a set, but I'm not going to talk about this, or like, I think that figuring out how to do that is where the creativity comes from. And there's plenty of vulgar comics who are not creative. So,
it's very interesting, because I actually just watched your 40-minute clip on YouTube, and it correlates with the what you just said about how you said something very important in there, but you turned it into a joke, where you said that I'm not going to make a joke about something I don't know about. And then you were talking about making jokes about Hinduism and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then I thought, I'm like, oh my God, he's about to go serious. But then the way you twisted that whole joke, I thought it was hilarious. And I think that correlates with exactly what you're saying. Like, you need to know what you're talking about. I'm a big fan of that.
I'm a big fan of that. And I'm a big fan of like telling a story one way and then going back, like looping back and telling it a different way. So that like when something happens, you know, later you think, you know, like you think it happened one way. Later, you are replaying it in your mind. You're like, man, that was not at all how like that interaction went. And that happens to me all the time, right? I have some interaction with somebody, and I'm like, man, I just nailed that. And then later, I find out like that is not at all. And so, to me, like that's about humility. It's about teaching people to like, you know, play with themselves, right? Like think of themselves playfully. And like, it's also surprising. People don't see where it comes from and they are surprised by it. And like, that usually gets a big laugh, even if I'm not like talking about sex or something.
Dude, I was dying when you said that joke. It was with the iCar or iCan, or I forgot what it was. It was a recent one you did.
Oh, is it
your YouTube clip?
One of the conventions, right? I think I was watching it as well.
The Care or something?
Conventions. Care.
Yeah, so it was Care. So that was
Ali, I'm going to throw the baton to you because I know you're sitting there eagerly waiting to answer a question. But like, what do you feel about in terms of like, you know, when you're watching comedy? Like, do you feel like offended when the comedian speaks out like vulgar comments or makes vulgar jokes, or does it not affect you?
I think for most part, if you're going in to go watch stand-up comedy, you know what you're getting yourself into. So if you're still offended by showing up to a comedy show, I don't know what to tell you. So I've gone a number of times to many different ones, especially like if you guys have ever gone to Gotham Comedy Club in New York City, they have sorts of people coming through, and a lot of it is profanity, vulgarity, like, you know, a lot of sex. So, you know, they're going to talk about that.
Is it an environment that someone who considers themselves spiritual should be in? I know it's a heavy question, but I'm interested to see your thoughts.
I mean, I have my own answer to that, but Ali, go ahead.
So, I don't know. Is it?
I'm asking you. I don't know.
What do you think?
What do I think? I mean, I think it
all depends on where somebody's spirituality level is. And that's different for every single person. Just as many people there are as that's how many different levels of spirituality, I would say, are for people. So at times, someone's spirituality might be high and they won't go there necessarily. And sometimes it's down and you're like, okay, maybe I'll go and try it out.
So now we know where your spiritual lands. Got it.
Hasnain, what's your opinion?
I'm going. I think if you're spiritual, I think if you're a sheikh or you're an imam, you should go to Gotham Comedy Club. I think you should check it out. It's an environment. It's fun.
I think there is kind of like an argument that we should be like aware of the culture of the predominant culture around us. So I think having an understanding of these things is kind of important. Ali asked me my perspective. I mean, the reason I asked Jeremy about it is because I'm just so torn, because like someone like Dave Chappelle, I love watching him, you know, I find him hilarious. But when he goes down that route, I'm just like, I feel uncomfortable. I want to fast forward or change it.
You don't have to think it's funny, right? So like,
it's not just that I don't find it funny. It's that I feel uncomfortable, and I guess maybe that's the point. I don't know.
Well, I think that's the same thing. I mean, I think that like what you find funny, you know, if you're, let's say, as you put it, your spirituality is high, right? Then you're going to be sensitive to things where, and I don't even think it's like because I don't think it's rational. I don't think that you are like hearing a joke and it violates some belief you have, and so then you're like, I'm angry. I don't think that's how it works. I think that like, just to give an example, one rule that I have is that you're allowed to joke about anything you want, but you have to do it in front of a group of those people, right?
Gotcha, yeah.
So like, if you're white, you can do black jokes as much as you want. Go do it in front of a crowd of entirely black people and see what happens, right? And most people are like, oh, I don't want to do that. And you're like, well, then what material was it, right? Like, what, you know, if you're white and you go to a black comedy club and you do it and you crush, then what does that say about your material? Well, it says that like you're perceptive and you are not just relying on these like outdated tropes. It means that you're saying something new, you're surprising them, right? Which if you're just some racist dude, you're not saying anything they haven't heard, and it means that like, I think on a deeper level, you're getting at something that is true about them or that is perceptive, and they are like appreciating it, right? They are like, they think it's funny. They think it's funny that you noticed that, right? But if you say something that offends them, I've spent a lot of time thinking about like what it means to be offended. And I don't think it's like some, like they said this and whatever. I think it's that like somebody said something and they don't get you, right? They are talking, like, for example, just talking about Islam, right? Somebody says a joke about Islam, and it's not that like you have some rule in your head, don't joke about Islam, and they violated it. It's that like they are lost, like they do not understand you. They are missing the point, right? They are ignorant, and it makes you, I think, feel lonely. I think that's a big thing that that happens when people are watching material and the person like goes into something that that just misses their reality completely, right? It makes you feel like your experiences, your beliefs are unintelligible to the outside world. And so let's say that you have experienced like child abuse or something, right? And the guy is up there joking about child abuse. Like it's not that, you're offended like rationally. It's that like you had those experiences and this guy just doesn't get it, right? But there's plenty of times the comic is up there, he's joking about child abuse, and he obviously went through it and he's just like nailing it, right? And you feel like someone gets me, like someone understands this, and someone and that makes you feel like your experiences, your beliefs are intelligible to the outside world. Like you can relate to other people, you're not just a stranger in the world. So I think that's like at a deeper level what's going on when we're talking about this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean that's just a very interesting and informative answer. And I think one thing it kind of reminds me of is whenever there's been occasions where stand-up comics that I've watched have kind of dabbled with Islam or Muslims, and I've laughed and not been offended because I understood that they weren't attacking Islam and Muslims in itself, but they were attacking the prejudices that exist about Islam, but just in a very clever way. So I feel like there are ways to play to that, and I feel like a lot of shows do that as well, that feature characters who were they to exist in real life would be racist and Islamophobic, and when you see it on screen you understand the joke because it's showing you how silly it is sometimes. So I do think it's also a way to kind of essentially educate as well, which I think is very interesting. I wanted to get into your religious upbringing, especially because I was very interested to read that you were born and raised Presbyterian and you converted to Catholicism. So if you can just start by explaining, what the differences are, how you raised what kind of spirituality you had growing up, and then what drew you to becoming Catholic.
Sure. Well, I think, growing up, I was raised Protestant, and then like the section of that is Presbyterian, which I don't think matters that much. But I was raised where spirituality was something that was kind of just in your head. It wasn't a set of practices. There was very little ritual. It was very sort of spiritualized, kind of rational understanding of the faith. And as I got older and I felt like that was a very impoverished understanding of spirituality. It wasn't holistic. It didn't involve the entire person. It certainly wasn't a way of life. It was just something that was private or personal, or like for me mainly it was just like a bunch of like theology in your head that wasn't integrated with anything around you. And started studying the history of Christianity, became convinced that like Catholicism was the OG, is the original kind of it's the main narrative. It's the main story of Christianity is I think the Catholic Church, and that Protestantism was a sort of modern split from that. And so then I became Catholic. That was like 3 years ago. So like I've always been a Christian in the sense of like having beliefs in my head about like God, Jesus, whatever. But I like it was a big deal when it became to me a way of life, and a lot of that was provoked by my interactions with Muslims, for whom it wasn't just like religion was not just like modern like religion. What we mean by religion is deen, right? It's the whole shebang, right? And so like that sort of interactions that I have with Muslims did help provoke thoughts that I had about what was missing and why I think modern Christianity has gone astray. And I think it does have to do with doing away with all of the things that used to be what what Christianity was. It used to have like prayers during different times of the day. It used to have like physical things. It used to have pilgrimages. It used to have all this stuff, and we've done away with all that. And instead, we just have like random beliefs about Jesus, and then we think that's it, and it's certainly not. So, to me, Catholicism involves it's an entire world, right? It's an entire almost like ecosystem of faith, and so that's where I am today.
Are there like divisions between Protestants and Catholics, or is it just like okay, you're Protestant, I'm Catholic, and that's it? Because I know you obviously within I think whenever someone tries to explain it to me, or whenever I hear conversations about it, it's always like the Sunnis and Shias of the Christian world are the Protestants and the Catholic. So I myself similarly I was raised Sunni, but read into Shiism and decided to follow Shiism as well, and I noticed a lot of familiarity in your story. Sorry, when you talk about struggling to find spirituality, and I feel like when you go on that journey of faith, sometimes it leads you to places that you didn't expect to go, right? Sure. So just generally speaking, I mean, what are the divisions involved, and does it ever get tense between the two, or is it just very chilled out? Or
I think for the most part it's chilled out, and I mean, especially in the United States. I mean, it's not like it's certainly not like it used to be, where it was very racialized, and like being Catholic meant being Irish and stuff. In the UK, obviously it used to be. I mean, and by used to be, it was like not that long ago, where it was where it was a big division between British Protestantism and then Irish being Irish Catholic, and the like the Troubles, right? So there are plenty of times, but I think more so now, as we see Christianity like declining, and also just like religiosity declining in the West, there's less, I think, desire to fight battles over things like that. And you fight battles in like a fun way. You like talk smack about people, and like you flex a little bit about like your religion, but it's really not acrimonious in the way. And obviously we're all scared of Muslims now, and so we're all just like that's bringing us together in a way that is and then hopefully one day we'll all just be scared of atheists, and that'll bring Christians and Muslims together. So
yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I think Hasnain, I did want to ask you, just getting quickly into I thought we'll just quickly dive into a bit of Sunni Shia discussion, as we did last episode, because I think one thing Jeremy said, which is very interesting, is that as you find Christians kind of move away from practicing religion, they or becoming, as in I guess, less interested in religion, they move away from that kind of need to to fight and argue between themselves. And I feel like with Muslims, you know, because we're under such Islamophobia, and especially the fact that we're in the West, we get deeper into our religion, we discover the roots of our religion, and as a result, sometimes I feel like, especially now, Sunni and Shia tensions are very, very high, because I feel like when you dive into your religion, you dive into your identity, you take hold of that identity, and then you find out there's someone, you know, who's of the same faith who's completely different to you, and sometimes you can't really process that. So you know, you get these kind of debates and fights. Obviously, it's much deeper than that. I'm simplifying it a lot. But what do you think we can learn from Christians in terms of, you know, how they've, I want to say, evolved in their mutual respect and understanding between each other?
I think it comes down to how they basically come like to the table. Like you take a seat at the table, and you just have a dialogue about it. This is what we believe. This is what you believe. We're under the same umbrella, and to each their own. I mean, because you know, a lot of my Protestant and Catholic friends, you know, they're very chill when it comes to like religion. You know, they keep it to themselves, but they don't necessarily like pour it out there. Like, you know how like I would do, like I'm Muslim and I show it and this, that, and that. For them, it's more like, you know,
I pour it
just
out.
like,
yeah.
You know,
I talk about it all the time. Yeah, it's all I talk about. So yeah.
So I think something that we can learn from them is just how to approach the table peacefully, and how to like not get so defensive. You know, like I noticed that in our communities, every Sunnis and Shias, it's just a defensive mechanism that we've built up, where you say something that instead you should just have a dialogue about, but you get really defensive, and then that's kind of where the wall stands up, and that's kind of where like things go the opposite way. So and that's just my
it can work the other way. You know, like, you know, I said that like the decline in religiosity can bring people together who are just religious, and you sort of have a mutual respect. It can work the other way, where like in a place that's not religious at all, people who are not serious about their faith will just drop out of the faith, and they'll become atheists or whatever, leaving the remaining people who are just crazy people, right? Who are like devout, you know, and they're the ones who are like serious, you know. So if you go to mass in a place like Italy, you're going to get a lot of people who are just regular people. If you go to mass in Jordan, right, it's going to be, or like Dubai, like it's going to be people who are like serious about like their faith, you know,
right.
Because it would just be super easy not to go. And so I think about that. I also think about like converts, you know, like converts, and the stereotype is just that like converts are crazy. And I think it's just because like you have to, like, I mean, especially in a place like where you can just be nothing, like you have to really believe it in order to, you know, convert, right? Whereas so it's kind of like immigration, you know, like if you in America, if you're an immigrant, it's because you like really wanted to be here, you know? But if you're born here, you don't have to know anything about America. You can just be like, well, you know, you don't have to know who the presidents are, but in order to become a citizen, you have to pass tests and everything. And that's how I feel about converts. It's like, you know, so I think that as religion declines, you know, there's opportunities for like interfaith work that is like meaningful. At the same time, we have to sort of realize that like we're pretty special. Like we're pretty unique in the sense of like actively trying to find a center amongst all of this, and like that's going to make us different than other people. So
moving on to, sorry, Ali, go ahead.
I think also with regards to what Stan was saying, people get defensive. From my understanding, I don't know if there is such a divisive story in Christianity where the different sects go different ways as there is in Islam with Sunni and Shia. So maybe that's why people are so much more defensive about it.
I mean, the Protestant Reformation is big, but also like the French Revolution's big, where like, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, and there's lots of killing. So, I don't know enough to like compare it like in terms of sensitivity, but like there are some things you don't talk about, like or you don't bring up in mixed company necessarily, or at least people don't like bringing it up. I always bring it up because I think it's funny to bring it up and see what people say. But that's just me.
You mentioned interfaith, and I wanted to get into your very fascinating relationship with Muslims, and just how that kind of came about. So just tell me, how your Muslim fan base came about, because I did come across. I remember when I first came across you. I think it was an article. I forgot who it was by, but it was just talking about how you went viral on Twitter. Because of I think you done a Twitter poll about biryani or something after coming back.
Oh, that was that was a ways after, like I think, I mean, I was already kind of popular.
So how did that start?
Happened.
Yeah, how did that start?
So before I became a comedian, I worked with people with disabilities. I was a caregiver in like care homes, and I trained caregivers on interacting with people with disabilities, and I had clients who were Muslim, and it's an interesting relationship when you're a caregiver and your job as a Christian is to help someone be a good Muslim, right? So it's like it's a weird. I mean, there's lots of Muslims who have that same situation. Like I worked with Muslims, and their job was to take people to church, who were just like mentally disabled and like wanting to go to church. And so it's interesting. And so, like when I became a stand-up comic, I was talking about all of that. I was talking about my own faith. I was talking about my interactions with with Muslims, like caring for people who were Muslim. And I had stories about that. And, this was like around the time that like Trump started running his mouth about Islam. And so when I was talking about that, people saw that as like that I was modeling some sort of engagement that was unique. And I went viral on Facebook and got booked, and Twitter, and I got booked at like some Muslim events. I remember they were like, have you ever done like comedy for Muslims before? And I lied. I was like, yes. And because I wasn't going to be like, no. And so then they were like, all right, you're booked. And so then I was like, all right, I got to write some material about stuff. And I think that like, my willingness just to like accept reality, like I said, and just like, instead of trying to put people into whatever previous thought I had, I was just like, all right, what is it? And I think that, telling stories and like that kind of material did very well. And then the Muslim community is like very well connected. And so like word spread, and then I got booked at all this stuff, and then sort of that's how it went. And then like 2-3 years ago, I went on a comedy tour of Pakistan, and like that went viral, and then it became like a big thing. And so like the whole biryani thing is because like I would have to like make biryani for my clients who are Muslim or who are like, Pakistani. I was terrible at it. And I put like aloe in it because I didn't know what aloe was. And so I put aloe, like actual aloe, like mixed it in, and it was gross. And so stories like that, and so then I started like that Twitter poll about like whether biryani should have aloe in it.
Yeah,
so,
I remember that blew up a lot.
There were like Pakistani politicians who were like weighing in and everything, and so it was a big deal.
What was Pakistan like? I mean, I find that very interesting. I mean, what did you kind of gain from it, I guess?
It was interesting. I mean, it was. I mean, I had a great time, and like it was just, I just said yes to everything and just went, and just had kind of like had a attitude of just like, all right, let's just see what happens.
Nice.
And so like, obviously, I mean, at this point, I'm saying everything that white people say when they visit Pakistan. It's like
it was so exotic.
The hospitality was so amazing. The people were so great, but like, it really was great. So, and I've been back every year, and usually for like a month in the summer. And I was supposed to go this past July, but coronavirus. So we'll see. We'll see what happens going forward.
How would you say, I know you spoke about this briefly, but how would you say, looking back at your career up to now, how would you say that interacting with Muslims has affected your own faith and spirituality?
I think, I mean, like I said, like before, it was a big part of like my faith journey in terms of finding a more holistic and more spiritual and sort of civilizational Christianity, and then also like there's a phrase that I forget who it was, but they call it like holy envy or something, where you're like you're envious of other people and like what they have spiritually, and so you dig deep within your own tradition, like to find like that piece that's missing. So you might like be jealous of, this is not what happened, but it's like an example, is that you might be jealous, or you might see Muslims with like the tasbih, like praying and stuff, and you might be like, man, and then you dig deep, and you're like, oh yeah, rosary, like why am I not like having that, and why am I embarrassed to have a rosary in public when Muslims are like having it, so like things like that where you're like, like there's something like you see something, and then it sort of rhymes in your head with something like deeper, like with you. And so then you're like, okay. And so, and some of it's like healthy competition, right? So, you see people showing you up with how much they pray, and then you're like, well, I can't just like let them pray more than me. So, so then you start praying more, and like, I mean, that happens too. So.
Nice. Ali, before I ask Jeremy about interfaith and kind of like how we should behave and engage with each other, I want to ask you that as well, because I know you have done interfaith work with Hussein, right? Going to churches, I believe, and helping them out. So what would you say like your experience has been generally working with Christians? And I feel like it's such a kind of cliche discussion, because I feel like when you speak about it, it's almost as if you make it exotic or different. But generally, it happens all the time. It's part of our daily life. So Ali, like, what do you think about how do you think interfaith relations should be, and what have your experiences been up in New York?
Well, in New York, it's been different from here in Colombia. And by the way, I'm in Colombia right now, Jeremy.
Colombia, South Carolina?
About a month ago, I moved down here.
No,
Colombia, South Carolina?
Colombia,
no, the country.
Oh, the country. Okay.
Colombia, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I was all excited. I'm like, people don't come here.
So, I don't know. I think a lot of times it's just that, like, or majority of the time when I work with various faiths, especially with the Christian faith, a lot of Christians don't realize that Muslims believe in Jesus, like, and with all the miracles and that he did, and they're like, "What? Really? What are you talking about? You're Muslim. You're not supposed to believe in Jesus." But no, like that's like the main thing that I find, whether it's here in Colombia or whether it was back home in New York, is that starting off with a commonality, I think, is the biggest thing, and then talking about the fact that Jesus is mentioned in the Quran so many times. His mom like has a whole chapter, like Mary, she has a whole chapter in the Quran. So that actually what it does, like one commonality, and it opens up the I guess the brain or like the thought process of the Christian that I'm speaking to. Like, oh wait, I thought it was completely different. And then we can obviously speak about the Abrahamic faiths, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Prophet Muhammad, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that eliminates a lot of the walls that people may have because they don't know. And a lot of it is just not knowing, because, Muslims are busy doing their thing, Christians are busy doing their thing, Jews are busy doing their thing. So once you open that up, I think it becomes a lot easier. And as a matter of fact, we worked with the Grace Church in Manhattan over the last few years, where we're working with Habitat for Humanity, building a house for a family that was in need in Queens, as well as painting walls and some of the apartments that needed to have taken care of in New York City. So we got to meet the same volunteers over and over and over, and we became friends. and also got to discuss faith, and to the point where at the Grace Church for Lent, for 40 days, they talked about Hussein and spoke about Islam during the time that they're doing the sermons. So I think it's amazing working with different faiths. It's just taking the time and opening up and talking about it from an open perspective versus, oh, you're this, you're that, or you're the other.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's so easy to draw lines between each other, be it, for example, Sunni, Shia, Protestant, Catholic, Christian, Muslim, you know, even atheist and theist. It's so easy to draw lines, but I feel like sometimes we really need to focus on the connections that we have to kind of, you know, reach common ground, which I think is important for growth. And I feel like, especially when it comes to Muslims and Christians, even, for example, you open the Quran, and the way God speaks about Christians in the Quran is different than other people's, right? I mean, he holds Christians almost to a higher standard than other faiths, and speaks about the special place that they have.
Right.
Jeremy, I wanted to ask you, what do you think the line is between interfaith and guidance toward the truth? Now, what I mean by that is, I think it's very easy to say, hey, you know, everything's beautiful, Christians, Muslims, just hold hands and sing together. But
I don't say
ultimately, most people do.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, what I mean is, when we speak about interfaith, usually that's kind of like the narrative. But ultimately, you know, every religion, to some extent, believes that they're the closest to the truth at the very least, right?
Sure.
So what's the line between sitting down with a Muslim and having that, you know, discussion about interfaith, and essentially, you know, bringing them towards what you would consider to be the truth, you know, or a Muslim, for example, having a discussion with you as a Christian versus bringing you toward what he would consider to be the truth, which is Islam. Like, where do you draw the line there?
Well, I think, you know, personally, I'm not like, I mean, it's interesting because I'm involved in all this like interfaith stuff, and I do a lot of like interfaith events, but like I'm not liberal, and so it's almost weird where like I'm like like a lot of interfaith stuff is almost disrespectful in the sense of not taking people's you know, claims seriously and not taking people's distinctiveness seriously. And I think that's true of a lot of interfaith work, where it's like, we all pretty much believe the same thing. And so, and I think implied in that is like, well, if we didn't, then we would have to not be friends anymore. And it's like, that's not true. Yeah. So I think that's a real tragedy with all, like most interfaith work. And so, but I think that like, another thing that a lot of interfaith work does is it treats people's religion as like irrational. So where like you have your favorite book and I have my favorite book, and these are just like myths that we have, and like it's just like this extra add-on to reason. So we have reason that you and I can like dialogue about. We can use our reason to like figure out things about the world. And then we also have this like religion that's like, you know, this like fun hobby we have, you know, and we share that. And I mean, that's something that that Christianity and Islam have rejected forever, is the idea that our faith is irrational. You know, for Catholics and for Muslims, reason can get you pretty far in terms of establishing the basics of the faith, and then revelation is something that sort of guides you towards like the final truth. But so for the most part, like the way that like when we talk about our faiths, we shouldn't be just like, okay, here's some like weird stuff I think in addition to like who I am. It's like, no, this is stuff that I believe is true. Like, and it's true in the same way that I think that like, you know, so like my computer right here is true. Like it's a separate category. And I do think there was something I wanted to bring up, but like there's a thing in computers, like the Turing test is with artificial intelligence, where like a robot, if a robot can convince you that they're human, then they pass the Turing test, right? Yeah. And there's something that this guy invented, which I like to lie, is called like the ideological Turing test. And it was like, can you, let's say you're liberal, can you like pretend, can you like write an article in support of Trump? right? Making the case for Trump in a way that like Trump supporters would think that you were a Trump supporter, right? And if you can't do that, then you don't understand like Trump supporters, right? And you don't understand why someone would support Trump. And the same way, you know, back and forth. And I think like we're losing that ability to understand each other, right? And that's a good test. And I've noticed this for a long time with like, you know, religion, where like the first test is like, you know, could I explain Islam to somebody who and do it in a way that would like convince people, like, you know, like convince the average Muslim that I was Muslim. And I think I can now. I think I'd be able to. But the vast majority of people can't, you know, wouldn't be able to. And yet they think that they reject Islam. They think that they can, that they're like against Islam. They write articles all day against Islam or whatever online. And it's like, yeah, but like you couldn't trick a Muslim into thinking you were Muslim. So how do you even understand it? Like that's something that I think about a lot. And so I think when it comes to like, you know, interfaith and like the line between that and like, because the goal is not just to like all get along. That's a good goal, like, to not like, you know, be at each other's throats. But obviously the goal is to like worship God correctly and like as he wants us to, and to like, you know, live in harmony but like in the harmony that God made us to be in. And so, but I think the first step in that is being able to get inside the other person's head and actually like understand in like a very deep way what it is they believe, why they believe it. And if you can do that, then you can like, you know, move on to like, you know, figuring out like, you know, like debating, I guess you would call it. But for the most part, debates don't even get far at all because they're not based on that like actual deep empathy of being able to describe what the other person believes.
As someone, as we round off, just kind of like to conclude, as someone who has this kind of special relationship with Muslims, despite not being Muslim, how do you think? What would you advise, or how do you think Islamophobia, which is so prevalent right now, can be defeated in America?
You know, it's tough, and I think it's entering an interesting phase because it used to be. It used to be, well, there's all these negative stereotypes about Muslims, and obviously the way you combat that is by you know, either debunking it or introducing people to Muslims, describing like how Muslims actually are. And like the strategy for a long time was, here are these positive qualities about Muslims that should make you less afraid of them. And but I think, you know, the past several terrorist attacks against Muslims that we've seen in the West, whether it's New Zealand or other kinds of things, the manifestos that they've written haven't actually contained anything negative about Muslims. The New Zealand manifesto, where he, you know, murdered all those people in the mosque, he didn't actually say anything negative about Muslims. He was talking about Muslims' positive qualities. And so he was like, you know, they have big families, they have, you know, a thick understanding of community and stuff. And so he was like, and that's why we have to like defeat them. Wow. Because that's the threat, right? So like they're gonna win. Is his panic, and that to me is much more dangerous. And I think we're entering, you know, that kind of there is that like those kind of like, you know, like Christian civilizational people who are you know, wanting to like revive Christendom and who think of, you know, Muslims as invaders, and they don't necessarily even have negative stereotypes about Muslims. They're just the enemy. I think that's really dangerous. You know, like the rest of the stuff, like you can correct people, you can teach people like what Islam is. Islam, you know, also teaches Jesus, things like that can make most people, you know, relax and stuff. And that's good. What I thought was interesting was that like Trump got 35% of the Muslim vote in the U.S.
Hasnain, who did you vote for? Sorry, carry on, Jeremy.
Well, no, and I mean, like, why did he get? And like 4 years ago, he got like 10%. I mean, it was like it's a huge jump. And really, all he did was he didn't talk about Islam for 2 years. Like, I mean, he insulted Ilhan Omar, but like, other than that, that's because he was like beefing with her. But like, other than that, like, he wasn't tweeting that Islam hates us and stuff. Like, he just chilled out for a second. And it's interesting to see just like, like that, just doing that can like, can make like, can at least affect somewhat of a positive realignment, at least positive for him. Not positive enough, not enough Muslims voted for him, and that's why he lost. Maybe now he's like even more anti-Muslim. He's like only 35%. If it had been 40, I would have gotten in.
Well, if you would have let him in,
right? Yeah, I mean, I think that most Islamophobia is just politically based. And I think that you might see more of a realignment in the U.S. where it's not just Muslims or Democrats, and like not Republicans. And the same thing with Hispanics, where like Trump made like a huge jump in like in the Hispanic vote this time. And I think that
Florida.
Well, I think, yeah, it's true. I mean, like, I think that like 4 years ago, or not 4 years ago, but like, like Muslims generally voted Republican in the U.S. I mean, like overwhelmingly voted for George W. Bush the first time, and then fled the Republican Party for,
second term,
like in 2003 because of the war in Iraq. And because of the war on terror and the like police state stuff. And so I think that like there are some signs that, and just like Catholics, Muslims are not innately just one party. There's a mix and stuff, and it's not like a party can really capture our priorities. And so I think having that kind of mix of political reality can open up some like some ways to, because like, I mean, it can open up some avenues to where like faith is not like, it's not demonized as much.
Yeah.
Hasnain, you were going to say something before.
Yeah, so I was reading this interesting article about like that 35% Muslims that voted for Trump, and how like a lot of their reasoning was because of like the Obama administration and their constant attacks on the Middle East, and how some Muslims decided they wanted to fall back on that. They didn't want a repeat of it. And so they went the other way. But, they were, like the article was saying how like these individuals were battling between two evils, like which way do we go? Because they have nowhere to go. So I just wanted to bring that up because, there was also like about, other situations about, supporting, Israel in the Middle East and the Palestinian conflict. And so that's why a lot of them went the Trump route, which is interesting because like Jeremy just mentioned, 4 years ago, it would have been a different ball game, which is very interesting how, people move back and forth and just at this point, we don't know where to go,
Yeah, I mean, I think for Muslims, based on the conversations that I've been having, it's that whole lesser of two evils discussion, and I think people are just sick of that discussion because it's okay, they're both evil. We lose either way. I remember with Clinton Trump, I know Muslims back then who voted Trump because they were like, Clinton is going to go to war with Iran, Libya, and all these guys, and going to be horrible for Muslims. Trump might be good. We don't know. Even though he's standing up and being openly Islamophobic, he might be different. And I think people were just so desperate for different that they're willing to cling to Trump. And even now, this whole kind of rhetoric that we're seeing right now today, that where you see Trump's son coming out and a lot of other politicians who are aligned with Trump coming out and saying that Republicans aren't with us, we're starting our own thing. It's because even though they're horrible, deep down they're disenfranchised by the political system, the same way that we all are. So I think that's just a nice, an honest portrait of what's happening right now in America. So I know we did a whole 360 and concluded again on the U.S. elections. But as a final question, Jeremy, before we let you go, what role is a heavy question? So hopefully you can take it. What role does spirituality play in your comedy?
Well, I think I touched on it a little bit before, where it's just, my view of reality is, obviously one's view of reality does influence what one thinks is funny. Because humor is just like is where your understanding of reality bumps up against it, reminding yourself that you're not God. And that you don't have a God's eye view of the world. You don't, and so that kind of humility, I think, is essential to comedy, which is why arrogant comedians always, I think like the comedy suffers when they take themselves too seriously. But I also think that I think that being spiritual, having spiritual practices keeps me grounded enough so that the crazy world of comedy doesn't affect me too much, in terms of people getting mad at you online and stuff. You can kind of you can keep grounded in a set of practices that sort of gives you a longer view of the world than just and even just talking about politics, a presidential administration is 4 years long. Our faiths have been around for a lot longer than that, and they're going to be around for a lot more. And so it that itself can keep you kind of grounded in something real and something lasting, and not think that some political story is the end of the world.
Absolutely beautiful way to end it. Jeremy, just wanted to take this moment to appreciate you and your great work. If anyone wants to follow your work on social media, where can they find you and how can they get in touch?
Just look up my name, just Jeremy McLellan, and it's all that's my name on all the social media. So
wonderful. I appreciate you, Jeremy. Thank you so much. Jeremy Hasnain Ali, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll speak again soon. Take care, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime.